what actually led you into this world of, I would call it fitness in a way, but like health, fitness, the physical world, if you will?
Because I'm definitely a unique kind of physical therapist. I just grew up doing sports, and I knew I wanted to do something in sports, and I knew I wanted to do something in the medical world. And I didn't really know what that looked like. Did that mean going to medical school and doing something with that? Did that mean being like massage, chiro, athletic trainer? What was it? And I ended up going to medical school for a little bit and realized that I absolutely hated it, and it was a wrong decision. And so I started looking into more of the hands-on things, like where can I get one-on-one time with people? Where can I take care of people and have these relationships and really be a problem solver for them? And so I kind of whittled it down to chiropractic and physical therapy. State of Kentucky, you can do all the chiropractic manipulations. You can do all of that stuff as a physical therapist. I was like, well, let's just go physical therapy world. Like maybe I'll get connected to a sports team somewhere. But I graduated 2016 from Western Kentucky University.
Okay.
We moved out, my wife and I, we moved out to the Seattle area shortly after graduation. I got connected with a sports-based physical therapy clinic. And it was really cool because they had a big focus on youth athletes. We saw a ton of the firefighters. We saw a ton of the police officers out there. So lots of very like tactical athletes. Mm-hmm. And so the time that I spent out there, it was incredible. I'm just learning how to work with these people, learning what drives them, what things they need to be able to do. Is very different from your 80-year-old with like a hip replacement. You got a firefighter who's got to be able to lift a 300-pound unconscious person from a tub, and it's just like, how do you train and get people back to this? And so I found a true love for treating those types of people out there. And then when we moved to Louisville about 4 years ago, this is where my wife is from. She's from Louisville. She wanted babies, wanted to be around family. And so we moved to Louisville. And I looked for a physical therapy clinic that would allow me to work with these types of people. And so I interviewed with a bunch of, quote unquote, sports physical therapy places that worked with athletes, and you walk in there and everybody's 60 plus years old and TheraBands and pink dumbbells and all that stuff. Like, this isn't sports. Like, you might see an occasional high school athlete. And I realized that these athletes are severely underserved in this area, and I know throughout the country as well. It's like the way that your typical physical therapy business is built. It's built around your aging adult. It's built around your post-surgical, because that's what's going to create more visits. That's what's going to create more money. And so it's kind of interesting to think that the most fit, active people don't really have a place or a focus in our world, in our medical world. And so I couldn't find any place that mimicked what I was able to do back out in the Seattle area. So I was like, I think I need to start my own business. And I think I need the athlete to be at the center of that. And so that's kind of how it was born. And I got my LLC, and COVID hit like a week later. I'm like, good gosh, okay. And so, so it's kind of morphed into what it is today. We're about to hit our 3-year anniversary next month. So exciting times.
Yeah, congrats on that.
Thank you.
Hey, Weight Room listeners. Looking to transform your fitness coaching business? Let me introduce you to Trainer Revenue Multiplier. With values like integrity, passion, and growth, they provide unparalleled training for fitness coaches like you. Whether you're just starting out or an experienced coach, TRM's got a package tailored for your growth. Jumpstart your journey with the Silver package, or elevate your game with the Gold. And for those who truly want to redefine success, Platinum's your next step. Don't just train, thrive with TRM. Check them out using the link in the show notes.
It's really interesting, and the way that I set this up, it was very unique to Louisville, not so unique to the West Coast. I decided to go what's considered out of network. It's very different from cash pay. Some similarities, and we can dig as deep as we want to into that. But blowing up on the West Coast, like on every corner, you're seeing out of network physical therapy companies that are dealing with their specific niche population, be that athletes, or be that your neuro or your orthopedics or your pediatrics. And then when I move out here to Louisville, what is this? Like, this is a new model. I just use my insurance. It's a direct thing. They tell you how many visits I get, and I just come to you, right? And it's like, no, like let's remove the middleman. Like, let's not let them tell us what to do. I work for you, right? You're hiring me for being a specialist for you. So why should anybody else tell me or tell us what we can and cannot do for one another? And so it was an interesting kind of breaking into that. And it's, I think, a little bit scary at first, but when people see what it is, and especially compare it to previous experiences that they have, they're like, this is completely different.
I think it's interesting, like you said, when we let a completely different industry with a completely different skill set and education and knowledge base dictate how we do what we do, or more specifically, you do what you do, in saying, okay, you only get X amount of visits, when in reality, like this person needs twice as many as that, and they need to be coming twice, like instead of once a week, they need to be coming here 2 or 3 times a week to get the X amount of results or whatever. Do you feel like that stems from what people wanted more of in regards to like what they saw as important, or do you think that started from like the healthcare system and just present it as here's, or maybe more insurance system and saying, here's how we're going to help you, but you don't realize that that's not actually going to help you until you get in that situation?
Right. And I think insurance has a really good like genesis. It started off with good intentions. It started off to be catastrophic of like, hey, if you've got cancer, if you need surgery, we're going to pay for this. We're going to help offset some of the cost. And then what it has morphed into in Western culture has been every time that I get the sniffles, I use my insurance. I've got this $5 copay. My wife went and got a prescription yesterday. It was like 45 cents. And I was like, cool, that's great. So then physical therapy took that same route. So then you got to have people, if we're giving people money to pay for medical services, there need to be some sort of regulation on that. And, because people will always take advantage of the system. It's, what did they say? When you're taking care of people, you're going to take care of the greedy and the needy. And it's like, well, okay. So how do we manage that safely? And so I think the insurance companies are good to a degree, but then it's just morphed into this thing, and it's starting, I think, swing back in the other direction where they're not really covering much for physical therapy. It's like, hey, we're going to give you this, and this is based off of this statistic and based off of this. And honestly, they're looking at functional outcomes. Can you put on your shirt? Can you put on your pants? Can you, like, all these functional things. So when you have a strongman athlete that comes in, and this is a true story, who could only had shoulder pain when he lifted over 90 pounds overhead with the circus dumbbell. He can't get into physical therapy. Like, he's functional. And so they come in, they laugh, and like, yeah, insurance isn't covering any of this. And so he's still got pain. And so that's affecting his passion. That's affecting things that he wants to do with his life. And that might not be a surgical problem right then, but it's certainly affecting his quality of life. And so we're kind of attacking that. And I think it's equally valid. Like, you think about the whys that people work out. Like, why do people want to stay fit? Why do people stay in the gym? And a lot of times it's a very deep-rooted reason. So it might be, I've got crazy bad anxiety. When I go to the gym, like, I don't have that anymore. Or, I've got a bunch of kids and I worry about aging, and I want to be able to play on the floor with them without pain. I want to be able to throw the football with my kid without shoulder pain. And physical therapy, like with an insurance-dictated world, doesn't really serve that. It's much more short-sighted of, can you put your shirt on? Can you go to work?
Like, if I wanted to go to physical therapy right now, is it something that is affordable without insurance, or is it, did the insurance world maybe make people think that it wasn't affordable because it is covered by insurance, and like there's almost like a mystery around how much it costs because it's kind of like behind barriers a little bit?
Yeah, and so I think there's certainly a mystery, and it's hard to go, it's hard to speak to generalities with that, because every business is going to be different and every insurance is different in what they're willing to pay. What I know is if you go to a generalist that focuses on a volume-based model, meaning I'm seeing 30 to 35 patients a day. My record is like 36, I believe, in an 8-hour day with one assistant who's helping clean tables and take copays, right? So my care is diluted. So therefore, if my care is diluted and I'm not a specialist, I'm going to have to go to more sessions. So that means more copays. And then if that problem is not solved, well, then you escalate that to cortisone shots. You escalate that to steroid packs, to imaging. People will start going into like your PRP, your stem cell, whatever, or even surgery. And so that is astronomically expensive. And so what I'll tell people is I'm going to be very transparent with what I charge. Your insurance, I give you everything you need for your insurance to reimburse you. So that depends on your insurance company. I've got a lady I'm seeing right now. She gets 90% of everything back that she's paid in. But she's seeing a specialist. I'm going to be able to see her in minimal sessions. For something that she's dealing with, person I'm thinking of has been dealing with shoulder pain for the last 6 years, and she's gone to PT before. She's gone to PT for 2 years and didn't get any better. And here we are sitting 4 to 5 sessions in, no longer has any pain. She's back to the gym. She's lifting overhead, no problem. And so the cost that she's having with me is going to be far less than everything she's already paid. And thankfully, she didn't go the surgical route. She searched and found me, or found, specialists that could help her. And so it's going to cost way less.
Is there a world where, and I don't know because I've never, been to a physical therapist, so I don't know like I was talking about the cost and things like that. But is there a world to where physical therapy, going to a physical therapist, is almost set up like a gym membership would be, where it's $50 a month? You come in, you do your thing, and then you kind of
it could be
do that on your own time.
Yeah, so it depends what. So the way I kind of set things up, I set things up in really 3 stages. And I've got a really cool acronym, is that the word for it? So I call it reset is the first thing. So the first thing when somebody comes in, you're coming in with pain, we're going to help kind of calm the tissue. We're going to get things calmed down. I'm going to teach you to move better. We're going to identify all these problems, start getting you to learn more about your body. Once we kind of get things calmed down, restore is that second aspect. So I'm going to restore you back to full activity. You're back to the gym. You're not really having to modify anything anymore. You're learning how to do more self-maintenance work. You're being a better manager of yourself. Phase 3 is kind of what you were just talking about. I call that reclaim. So we hit the reset button, we hit the restore button, and then we reclaim. That's where you're coming in less frequently. So you're not coming in once a week or twice a week or anything like that. You're coming in less frequently, and I am just putting you through the gauntlet. So say you came in with a shoulder issue, I am going to come and I'm going to make it hell for the next hour, and you're going to work out, and we're going to test that by fire to make sure that pain is gone and for good. But then that's also the time when we start looking at other things. So you might say, well, my shoulder's good. I've kind of had a knee problem for the last few years. Can we start looking at that a little bit? Can we start looking at this low back issue? And so we take a much more global approach. And so then we just have a membership for these people. They come in once a month, twice a month, whatever it is that they feel is best for them. And I don't typically have a plan. It's what do we need to work on today? They may say, hey, my neck is a little bit stiff. I had a power lifter come in who was having some issues with his squat. We spent the full hour working on squat form and technique and what types of things he could do to improve his mobility, to improve the squat. There was a lady who came in last week where we talked a lot about anxiety. We talked a lot about nutrition. We talked a lot about habits that she could work. And so really these sessions are all about helping you move forward with whatever it is in your life. There's a bodybuilder that I'm seeing once a month, and I literally stick dry needles in him for the full hour every single month. He's like, this is the most effective thing in the world for me. This is what works. If he comes up with an injury or a tweak or anything, we address that. But I know every single month he's coming in and we're just lighting him up with needles. And so in that way, you're getting ahead of injury. You're maintaining things, but you're also able to take care of things before they get bad. And ideally, you're improving. And it's oftentimes when you bust through that ceiling, that functional ceiling of, I'm never going to be able to, play on the ground with my kids because of this knee pain. Well, you're doing that now. So what's next? Maybe you want to run a marathon. Maybe you want to do like an Ironman or something like that. And so kind of walking alongside with people doing that and directing them has been very helpful, and it's been awesome. And that's something that healthcare is certainly missing, is coming from a proactive approach.
When you do push people, you said you kind of put them through the gauntlet and really test out the stuff that you've been doing, to what degree in your own head are you and maybe it's better now that you have more experience, but to what degree are you a little bit all right, that was good and they want to keep pushing, but let's not keep pushing just in case? Or do you say, if that, feels good, or if you can do it, keep pushing? To what degree does that come into play as far as being precautious, but also being able to push the limits?
Sure. Yeah, because we injure ourselves when we ask our body to do something that it is unable to do. And so right now, I may not be in any pain, and I could go out and run 5-6 miles without any pain, but there's going to come a time, if I keep pushing that run, I will be in pain because I've asked my body to do something it is unable to do. And so I think with that, once you get to the point of pushing somebody really far, it comes to a lot of experience. It comes to knowing them, knowing their irritability level, knowing what they're doing in the gym. I have a lot of contact with their trainers. I have a lot of contact with people's gyms, so I know what they're doing. I know oftentimes what their programming is. I know what they're capable of doing. And I've worked with them long enough to that point where I understand their bodies and I'm understanding their mannerisms of like, man, you're starting to get a little uncomfortable there. Hey, maybe we should back off. Or you're starting to come under some form failure here. Let's back off. And so understanding like we want to be curious, but like we want to be cautious. I always tell people to be like cautiously curious when we're dealing with injury. It's like, let's not be afraid of working out. Let's not be afraid of pushing the envelope a little bit. But let's be curious and let's try to toe that line as close to it as we can. And like, what pain feels like. And if it does flare up a little bit, like, okay, well, that's not steps back. We just know where that line is right now. So we don't need to be afraid of that. Pain is an alarm system. That's all it is, telling you, hey, I'm requesting change. And also understanding, like, is this alarm system calibrated correctly? Because sometimes people don't listen to their bodies and you got to hit the brakes for them. But then there's also people where you're like, man, this is really uncomfortable. I'm really nervous. You're like, hey, hit the gas pedal a little bit. You're going to be fine. Like, we're not doing anything to hurt you. And I want to prove that to you. Yeah. And so, but always you want to have a successful session. You don't ever want anybody to walk out hurting and be like, what is going on with this? And so you always kind of stop on the conservative side with things. But I just think from experience, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been pushing people hard for a long time. And so you can understand that a little bit and not be crazy.
Do you think there is more conservative effort in physical therapy or too much of the let's keep pushing and then pushing too far?
I think there's a little bit of both. We talked about how your mainstream physical therapy company is designed for post-surgical. It's designed for your elderly. And oftentimes it's really sexy to call yourselves a sports clinic or we treat athletes. And when in reality, athletes might be under 5% of the type of people that they see. So therapists will either go two directions. They'll either go gung-ho and be like, all right, let's do all this stuff. And they'll like overprescribe, like too much dosage for the patient. That's assuming that this physical therapy company has adequate amount of weights. Most mainstream PT companies, they don't have weights over 5-10 pounds. They certainly don't have barbells. They certainly don't have kettlebells or any of these things that are going to push athletes. And so you can have, if they do have the adequate equipment, sometimes they go way too gung-ho, but also they may get kind of freaked out. This is an athlete. So let's, be conservative with them because I don't really know what I'm doing with them. So then you get in this situation where you've got this 35-year-old power lifter with a knee pain going through the exact same exercise progressions as your 70-year-old with knee pain. And that's not okay. And typically when I get on phone calls with people, I always do a initial consult call to make sure that, I'm a good next step for them. That's one of their main complaints is like, I've been to physical therapy before. I'm doing the same thing as this person who doesn't do anything. They don't understand that, I'm deadlifting, 400 or 500 pounds and that's what I want to get back to. They don't understand that I run marathons and that's what I want to get it back to. Like, I'm not going to get better with these TheraBands. I'm not going to get better with these little pink weights. And so it just depends. And I know that's the answer to a lot of questions. It just depends, but people typically go one of those two routes.
Yeah. And is if somebody says they want to get back to running a marathon or deadlifting 500 pounds, does the physical therapy itself, does it have to be more intense in regards to whatever you may think of as intense, but does it have to be more rigorous or does it have to be more in general, or can you do it in regards to you do it lighter for longer, or does it have to be a specific this is the program to get your body where it needs to be able to do this type of intensity of exercise?
Sure. With the initial assessment, the goal of that is to gather as much objective data as we can on the patient. And so if they're coming in with low back pain, and the person I'm thinking of, the example I'll use, she came in with low back pain after back squats. And so it was starting to affect everything. And so we went through her entire body and we found a lot of inefficiencies. So some hip mobility, some ankle stability, lots of single leg instability. So we come up with this big laundry list of this is inefficient, this is inefficient, this is inefficient. And we know that inefficiencies create force leaks, so you're not able to lift as much. They also create compensations. When we compensate, we're going to be using certain structures more or less than we ought to be, and that leads to injury. And so we start focusing on those things initially, like, hey, let's work on that hip mobility. Let's work on this. But then with her specifically, I was like, well, I want to see you do a back squat. And I was like, what's your back squat max? And she was, I will say like 155 or something like that was her back squat max at that time. And I loaded her up, started building her up. Squat form looked perfect until we hit 135. And then once she hit 135, the form started breaking apart. I was like, well, that's part of your problem right there too. So like you need to be able to load them to see what happens when you get under heavy load. Once you get to that, 80+% of your 1 rep max. And then there's a very robust home exercise program. Like I'm not going to take you through a full like leg day in there. Like I'm going to work on your inefficiencies and I'm going to challenge you and make sure that form doesn't break. But there's going to be a very robust home exercise thing saying, like, hey, this is what I want you to work on. Like that power lifter I was telling you, we came and worked on his squat form. He was having some low back pain as well. We noted that he was having some quad insufficiency. And so that was causing his hips to rise faster. I call it the stripper fault, where those hips rise faster as you're coming out of the squat than the rest of your body. So his homework was on days that he was doing back squat, I wanted him to move to front squat for a month or two. And so program more volume, heaviness with the front squat. Ideally, that is going to increase quad development, and that is going to circumvent that fault. And so a lot of direction, there's a lot of communication between sessions. Like I don't see people super frequently, maybe once a week at the very, very most, unless we're talking post-surgical. And then once pain is gone, which happens pretty quick, once movement patterns are improving, we start spreading that out. Hey, let's see you every 2 weeks. This is what I want you working on. These are the top 3 things that I want you focusing on in the gym. And so being able to like walk with them, knowing that if I've got an hour with them once a week, I can do the best possible physical therapy in the world. And if they don't understand what we're doing, if they don't do anything on their own, they're not going to get any better, or it's going to take a very, very long time. And so I try to position myself as a guide and a teacher, making sure they truly understand what is expected of them in between sessions, and that they know that if they're having issues or questions, that they can reach out to me. Every single patient has my number. They've got a million ways to contact me. I encourage them after every single session, reach out with any problems. Because I would rather us deal with it over the phone than you stop doing everything and we just lose a week of progress.
And you mentioned front squats. Is a front squat a better variation to start out with?
Typically, I'll go more towards like a goblet style squat first, and then
Right.
front squat is going to be a little bit easier to pick up on. But then, if you're not going to be a competitive power lifter, I could care less whether you can get into that front rack position. That's typically a limiter for people. And so showing modifications, like one of my favorites is throwing a wrist strap or 2 wrist straps on the bar, so then you can just kind of get above it like that, and so you can still get into that position. So goblet squat, front squat, those are excellent entries into squatting. And it just depends on the person. It depends on their goals. Like what is going on. Like you may be somebody who, has like really bad ankle mobility, and so squatting is really tough and front squatting is really tough. Okay, so what happens if we throw a kettlebell in your hand and we elevate those heels a little bit with a slant board or with a couple of 5-pound dumbbells or 5-pound plates, and then all of a sudden you're taking the ankles out of it, and they're like, oh, you're actually able to squat now. Let's work on engaging those hips. Let's work on engaging this torso. All of these things, all the while we're working on ankle mobility at the same time. And so, it just depends. It's like, what is your goal? Why is that important to you? How can I help you meet that as efficiently as possible?
Yeah. And what are some of those ankle mobility just kind of tips out there for people to keep in mind? I know a lot of you are coaches and trainers. Ever feel like your fitness coaching business could achieve more? That's where Trainer Revenue Multiplier comes in. They're not just about training. They're about transforming your passion into profit. Dive deep into value-driven coaching with TRM's unique approach, ensuring you stay true to your integrity while driving growth. From beginners to seasoned pros, they've got a package tailored just for you. So whether you're aiming to turn part-time into full-time or multiply your revenue, TRM's got your back. Check them out at trainerrevenuemultiplier.com.
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of like banded mobility things. So you can picture ankle mobility as like a joint bias. So there's going to be a lot of tightness in the joint. So there's a lot of like banded mobilizations that you can do for that shin bone, for like that talus bone, for all the joints in your feet to open that up. And then you've also got like the muscular aspect of it as well. You've got a bunch of different muscles in the back of your calf. Some of them are, 2-joint muscles. Some of those are 1-joint muscles. And so, flexing that calf with a straight knee and stretching that calf with a bent knee are going to hit 2 different muscles. And so sometimes one may be moving perfectly well and the other is super, super tight. And so, and I'm always a big fan of just smashing stuff. And so like, smash it on a foam roller or a lacrosse ball, or like, you really want to get sinister, use the horns of a kettlebell and put it on there. So that's great. Are you familiar with voodoo floss?
I don't know what that is.
Voodoo floss is like a long strip of rubber. Like we're talking maybe 3 inches wide and 40 feet long or something like that. And it works fantastic for calves, as you can wrap up the entire calf with this voodoo floss. So you're creating this compression. And the idea is that you're compressing all of these structures. Like you've got your skin, you've got different layers of muscle, you've got fascia, you've got fat. And when you compress all of those and you go through certain mobility movements or go through certain like smashing of sorts, you're creating friction and you're creating shear force between all of those layers. Because oftentimes those layers, when you have tight muscles, they don't move super independently with one another. And so adding a shear force along with that compression oftentimes opens that up pretty effectively. And so voodoo floss, it's one of those things that I just tell all my athletes, it's the best $7 you'll ever spend. Just go on YouTube or go on Amazon, spend $7. Like, it's fantastic for calves, for forearms. Oftentimes if some people are having like anterior knee pain with squatting, throw it on there. It's just a really good self-maintenance thing. And that's one of the first things I do if I'm starting to get any type of, forearm, elbow pain or any type of ankle stuff going on. I just voodoo floss it and it typically gets it back pretty quickly.
Is there any validity to just keeping it on there? Like, not forever, obviously, but, for just while you sleep or while you're doing the dishes or, just randomly? You
don't want to keep it on too long because you're occluding blood flow.
Right.
And, blood is kind of important and nutrients are important. But there's you can keep it on for several minutes, assuming that you don't have any blood flow issues. And so, yeah, you could do it with the dishes, but I'm typically one of, let's kind of get in and get out. Like, do what you want to do it as efficiently as possible, and then move on to the next thing. And so I'm typically going to concentrate, like if I was throwing voodoo floss on my ankle, no more than 4 or 5 minutes, and just roll the crap out of it, mobilize the crap out of it, and then go ahead and retest. It's always important to test, retest. How's your ankle mobility before? How's your ankle mobility after? Just to determine, is this something that's actually effective, or am I just wasting my time? Because it's so easy to come up and have all these mobility tools and tips and tricks and things, and then pretty soon your warm-up or your cool down at the gym is 45 minutes. And that is just a waste of time. Your warm-up shouldn't take more than 10, 15 minutes in the gym. And it's get to your main lifts as quick as possible. So figure out what's the most efficient thing to do and just do it and get out.
Is the warm up, is that something that has become more necessary as people are more sedentary?
Yeah, I think just with our lifestyles, it's becoming more of a necessity. Did you ever read the book, The Becoming a Supple Leopard? You ever heard of that? It's the movement Bible. The idea is it's a really silly title, right? Becoming a supple leopard. Supple is kind of in the same category as moist for me. It's that's just a word that's just kind of oh, why'd you say that? But if you think of a leopard, it's one of the most agile animals, but it's a big cat. And this big cat sleeps all day long, and it sleeps in a tree. And then in a matter of seconds, it will jump down from that tree, go into a full sprint, kill something, drag it back to that tree, drag it up the tree, and then eat it. Now, if I went out and ran and sprinted right now, I would probably pull a hamstring. And so then the idea is you want to become a supple leopard, you're always in this ready state of whenever action calls upon me, I should be ready. And so how do you integrate that into your day? How do you have these movement snacks throughout your day to where if I need to bust into a sprint, or if I need to bend down and grab something, or if I'm playing with my kids, I don't have to go through a 20-minute warm-up routine just to do that right. And so movement snacks is something I'll often encourage people to do throughout the day. What is the most important thing for you right now? What are you limited on? How can you integrate this throughout the day? One of the examples I'll always give is I was trying to work on my squat depth a lot last year. And my ankles are tight, my adductors are pretty tight, And I just got it in my head. I was like, I just need to get deeper into a squat. And so if I'm doing 1 leg day a week or 2 leg days a week and I'm doing like 5 sets of whatever, like that's not a ton of time in the bottom of a squat. But what happens if every single time that I pee for the next month, I do 10 squats in the bathroom after I'm done peeing. And so think about how long I get to hang out in the bottom of that squat. Or if I'm just hanging out and want to accumulate, 5-10 minutes a day in the bottom of the squat. And what that did for my mobility was incredible. And it was just a movement snack, and you accumulate so much volume throughout the day. If you drink nearly as much water as I drink, you accumulate a lot of volume at the bottom of that squat, and then your mobility thanks you for that. And so I think the goal would be for warming up is for a gym is like you're in this ready state as well as you can be. And then depending on what you're doing that day, what are, 3, 4, 5 things that you can do in the matter of, 10, 12, 15 minutes, one, to just prepare the tissue for movement, but also knowing and understanding, having a robust knowledge of your movement deficits, of your movement faults, of your force leaks, so that you can go ahead and have some special attention to that. So if you know that it's squat day and you've got some limited internal rotation on that one hip, what are 1 or 2 exercises that I can do that are going to specifically target that? My thoracic mobility might be fine. I might not need to worry about that. Where somebody else comes in, hip movement is fine, thoracic mobility sucks, so they might spend more time on that. And then always like in the wintertime and stuff, like it's cold. And I work out in the morning, and so I come to the gym cold, and so I have to like hop on the bike for 5-10 minutes or so just to get the blood pumping, just so I don't hurt myself.
And in the same kind of regards, what about a cool down? Like, is there more of a necessity for that in the same way? Because we are kind of like going to the gym. That's a very active part of our day, but it may be one of the only active parts of our day. And then we're, depending on, when you go to the gym, if you go in the morning, maybe you're going and sitting at work all day, or maybe if you're going at night, you're going and you're sitting on the couch and then going to bed right after. Like, is a cool down more of a necessity because we do have that? I don't want to say we do in regards to everybody, but a good portion of us have a very sedentary life. So then it's like we go from very active to not active at all.
I mean, like, I think a cool down's not a bad idea if you've got, 5-10 minutes. And oftentimes if I'm just got a few minutes and I'm wanting to cool down, I'll honestly just lay on my back with my feet up on a bench or up on a wall and do some deep breathing exercises. So I'm really trying to shift my body into that parasympathetic state. Just trying to get as much oxygen to my body. And then throughout the day, I'm doing my movement snacks. In the evening, I'm just doing recovery stuff. Like, recovery is a hot term these days. And so that might mean breaking out my massage gun. I've got different mobility tools at home. That might mean if I'm watching TV at night that I'm popping into a couch stretch for 5-10 minutes on each side and just moving around. And so I find that stuff to be more helpful, just the frequency and volume of movement just accumulated throughout the day. And then and also like combining tasks, like if I'm watching TV, there's no reason why I couldn't be like hitting my upper traps with a massage gun at the same time. Or if I'm having a conversation, with my wife, why can't I be on the floor, in like a 90-90 shin box position, just opening up those hips? And I find that to be more helpful. And then it's like the pillars of recovery too. It's like sleep. If you're not sleeping right, you're not going to recover right. And like those are things that you want to focus on, like your hydration, your nutrition, all of those things. But do you need, 15, 20, 30 minutes to do a cool down? Like, you don't. Like, if you have the time for it, sure. But like, I'm pretty busy. It's like I've got an hour that I carve out to go to the gym, and ideally I get there 5-10 minutes early and kind of focus on what I need to focus on. But I do not have the time, or I don't have the capacity to spend 2-3 hours in the gym. And at the end of the day, it's a priority, right? Like, I do not prioritize spending that much time in the gym because I got other things that I need to worry about. It would be irresponsible for me at this point in my life to spend 2-3 hours in the gym several days a week.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's get the most out of what I can out of that hour, and integrate these movement snacks throughout the day, do as much recovery, focus on sleep, focus on hydration, nutrition as much as I can, and consistency.
What do you think the world looks like if everybody is, forgetting the strong man athlete and the power lifter, but just, the quote everyday kind of person who maybe has some kind of interest in being healthier, but they don't go to the gym to PR or whatever. Maybe they don't even go to the gym, but Have you ever thought about what our world does look like and what, maybe even more specifically our country looks like? Obviously, maybe less obese and things like that, but just if we did make the small things more of a priority, like you said, instead of just sitting on the couch, you do some stretching or, focusing more on sleep or on water, just small things like that.
We'd probably be a lot happier. When you think about like our body is designed to move, we get these dopamine bursts every time we move. And after you work out, you get the endorphins, and it's, it's my anti-anxiety pill. I would be on anxiety and depression medication if it was not for working out. I would be in a lot of pain if it wasn't for working out, because we're built to move. And like the simple test I'll tell people is like, stand as still as you can, knees locked, everything locked. And what happens if you just stand there? Like you start to get stiff, you start to get painful, like you're having to move around. And, when you wake up after a hard night's sleep, you're stiff. And like we're built to move. And so people who are not moving, their joints aren't as healthy, their muscles aren't as strong. And strong people, what do they say? It's like strong people are harder to kill and more useful in general. I was like Mark Ripito or somebody said that. And when you're weak and you try to do more functional tasks, like you're going to injure yourself more. And so like I'm not going to injure myself picking my kid up out of her crib or picking her up out of a bathtub. I might injure myself, deadlifting 400 pounds. That's okay. That doesn't happen frequently. But I think the world would be less reliant on medication. We would be healthier mentally. We would be like nicer to people too. Like you're walking around happy and you're not in pain, you're going to be less of a grumpy person. Mm-hmm. And so we'd probably do a better job of loving people. But it's so common sense to me that I just like, why don't you just move? Like when I was a kid, I found out really quickly that if I had a stressful day, I could go run and I'd come back and reframe it. And, it still might be something really bad that happened. You got to manage that. But like all the emotions have calmed down and I feel much better and I see it through a new light. And so, I think it'd be a good thing if people did that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we see it in adults, and we've seen it in adults for a while now. But it's crazy to think that we're seeing it more in kids too. What effects will that have for this upcoming generation, to where you see, knee replacements and hip replacements and neck and back and shoulder pain and all that kind of stuff generally at an older age right now, maybe at 50 or 60 or whatever. But is that even going to continue to trend lower?
And it probably will, because like even think about like the movement patterns that you learn as a kid. Like when you're playing basketball or you're wrestling, you're jumping on a trampoline, like you're learning how to jump, you're learning how to move your body in space, you're learning how to do all these different things. And these children, if they're not doing that, they're not learning these vital skills of like, how do I fall well? How do I jump? How do I hop? How do I like do all these things? And so then, so it's like I grew up outside all the time too. It's just like sports, and you go inside to eat dinner way too late and you go right back outside and play basketball or whatever it was. And I think it's interesting, and you can think about it from a physical way like we've just been talking about, but also like mentally. If like you're on video games all the time, you're on your phone all the time, you're just getting these like dopamine hits all the stinking time. And there's been several books and studies out there of like if you're on your phone all the time, like you're getting all these dopamine hits, like depression and anxiety are close behind that. And it's really scary, and technology is kind of being built to be super addictive because that's how you use their product and that's how people make more money. And so these kids in their formative years are playing video games, and they've got iPads and devices. And I mean, like we've got a 2.5-year-old daughter, and it is scary how obsessed she is with our phones. It's just like I don't understand it, but like it scares me to death how bad she wants the phone sometimes. And I was like, no, just go play. And so this is a small mind. This is a developing mind. So I don't think we're going to realize like the gravity of these changes that are being made in these little kids' brains by letting them sit in front of a TV or letting them play on your phone. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I don't want to demonize parents who do that, because there are certainly times where it's like, sit down and watch Frozen, like while we make dinner, like calm down. So I don't think it's bad to do that. We've got friends who's like, okay, every car trip you get an iPad. Like that's for the parents' sanity as well.
Right.
But it's like these kids that's all that they do. That they don't go outside and play. ever. And I think there's going to be some really big issues as they move into adulthood, not only from a physical state, but also a mental state and also in a relational state between kids. Like with this COVID, like they've got no ability to communicate with each other anymore.
Right.
It's wild. It's scary. Yeah. I don't know what that's going to look like.
A few times you said like anxiety and depression, and if you didn't have the physical kind of lifestyle that you did, you might be on like a pill or medication, right? And then you mentioned yourself, but I think you were speaking in the broader sense, and it just took me back to like this. I think it was some research or whatever that came out maybe like a year ago or whatever, and it was talking about like how I think it was physical activity. I'm sure they did some sort of like specific physical activity in the study, but I can't remember what it was. But it was more powerful than I can't remember if it was anxiety or depression medication or both or whatever, SSRI, whatever. But it was more powerful in regards to treating anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because you have the combination of people, and you mentioned like the social media thing too, where it's like an over sensation of that like dopamine hit, and then does that kind of like wear your system out, and then you fall into that, and then because you're not physically active, you're also falling into that anxiety and depression. So it's like a twofold kind of thing that's happening. It's extremely fascinating when we know that as like from a scientific perspective, but there's still not like things that are truly being done to like make a real change behind that. I mean, I have like a mixed conscience on that because I know like we live in a free country and we live in a capitalistic society, and like I think that's beneficial in a lot of ways, but it's also seemingly like we're in this era, and maybe it's always been this way, but just maybe more so microscoped in on it myself, but like where large, huge businesses, whether that be, technology companies, or if you're looking at like Amazon or whatever, it's like it's not focused around humans anymore. It's focused just around, stock prices and how can we, earn more this quarter. And it's just crazy to me that we live in a world full of humans, but we're almost like anti-human. Like we're against ourselves in so many ways.
And I think part of it is like the swing of our society and our culture is like, you do you. There's no degree of absolute truth, if you will. Like there's nothing that, this is absolutely wrong or this is absolutely right. And so then we're very fearful about telling others our positions on things and our biases on things. And even when it comes to like health and wellness, like, well, of course, being at a healthy BMI is a good thing. Of course, being strong is a good thing. Like we all intrinsically know that. But how dare you, I tell you how to, raise your child, that they need to go outside and play. And so it's a very sensitive culture at this point in time where you can't tell people things that at least are very evident to me that should be like, oh, this should just be a standard truth for all of humanity. Get your kid off of the iPad and let him go outside and go play, or make him. Like, I know he doesn't want to. Go outside and go play. He's going to end up loving it. And so I think that's part of it. It's just so hard to implement things because we live in such a big country and we love our laws, but we also love our freedoms so much. And even if your freedoms are not doing great things for you, you can't step on that. And there's some good in that, right? There's obviously good parts to that and there's bad parts of that. But I think that's kind of part of it is I was like, well, your kid doesn't have to participate in PT if he doesn't want to. Like I remember gym growing up, like it was hardcore. Like we had like all the testing and stuff, and now it's like not.
I heard they got rid of the presidential whatever test.
I've heard that as well. And just because, I don't know why, like I've got my speculations, but I was like, well, I'm not all about bullying, but like maybe if you can't do like a pull-up, maybe it should be a little bit of peer pressure to be stronger, because that's going to help you.
I mean, that was like my motivation growing up in a lot of ways to get stronger. I got my own pull-up bar.
Yeah.
And that like led me into this world of fitness.
Yeah.
And like understanding not just that, pull-ups are important, blah, blah, blah. You got to be a meathead, but like how to train and how to take care of your body and how to eat healthy and all that kind of stuff. It's like at some point, you do you is okay if you know both sides of the coin. Mm-hmm. But when you have no guidance because people can't guide you because, right. Oh, well, that's not what we believe, or that's not, that's offensive because whatever. Like, that is dangerous because you're not giving a child any structure anymore. There's no blueprint. There's no do this and you receive this, or do this and there's consequences for that. Like, at the end of the day, that sounds fun as a kid, but like whenever you're growing up and you don't understand why you have, type 2 diabetes at 14 years old, or, why do I have lung cancer on, sad to say it, but lung cancer from vaping at, 8 years old and on, and all those kind of things. Like, it's just, there has to be a freedom, I think, but there also has to be let's at least give people the information and not just the availability of that information because we have that right now, but truly teach and educate and like be responsible for the upcoming generation.
I'm a big believer in the whole like discipline equals freedom aspect, and like discipline is not fun. Like, I work out in the mornings, and there are no mornings that I wake up and I want to go to the gym. It's like I would love to sleep in a little bit longer. My bed is so warm and cozy, but I know the gym is going to be good for me. It's going to create so many benefits, and just everywhere in my life. Like, I find that the more disciplined and the more regimented I am in, the more like I benefit from it. Like, it gives me so much more freedom. And, like when, you do sleep in or you don't work out, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to get weak. And then when I get weak, I get painful. And now I'm going to have to go to doctor's appointments, and I'm going to be on all this medication that's doing who knows what to my brain and body chemistry. And it's like, well, just go to the gym, carve an hour out of your day, go do something for yourself, and that's going to pay off. And so, yeah, same thing with kids. Kids thrive off of structure. Kids thrive off of discipline. And you're a kid, so you're not going to have the perspective that a parent has. And that's your job as a parent, is to direct the child and to discipline the child and bring them up as like not a serial killer. Like teach them good habits that are going to last like a lifetime and benefit them for a lifetime. And I know like growing up when it comes to like fitness for me, my parents curated that environment. It was a very physical environment. And my dad would oftentimes be like, hey, I bet you can't do 50 push-ups. If you do it all, I'll give you $5. Or, hey, if you can do a 5-minute wall sit, we'll go get ice cream tonight. And I remember countless times him kicking us out of the truck like 2 miles away from the house, being 30 minutes away from dinner. He was like, see you guys at dinner. And probably because we're just annoying him, but it's just like, it was very much worked into the DNA of our family growing up that physical fitness was something to be heavily focused on. If we were in sports and we weren't lifting, if we weren't wanting to go to practice, if we weren't going out and like pushing, like they'd pull us out of sports. It's like, this is like, yeah, you will train, like you will be disciplined in this, and you will do this to, your highest capacity. And so that was just how I grew up, and I feel very lucky and blessed to be able to do that. And so I probably am a little bit jaded towards kids that don't have that, and it's because I see the benefit in my life and how beneficial it was. I just feel like a cranky old man all the time. It's just like back in my day, I wasn't this way. Kids did this and kids did this, and it's just I have to laugh at myself all the time. I was like, I'm quickly becoming an old man with a lot of these things, but ideally a wise old man.
Do you feel like that's a thing in physical therapy, that people have like a fear of you and like what they may have to do that holds them back, even though they might be in pain until that pain does reach a certain threshold?
I don't know if they're necessarily afraid of me outside of just going to the doctor. And like we live in such an individualistic society of just like, I'm just going to suck it up and suffer through it until I just can't anymore. And so I don't know if it's a fear, but also like physical therapy has done like a really horrible job of like marketing what we actually do. And then your mind, especially as like a young active person or even an older active person, when you think of physical therapy, you think of people who are, very old, you're thinking of like, gait belts and relearning to walk, or you're thinking, even if you're working with an athlete, maybe it's a military person that's an amputee that got shot or something, but there's just a lack of knowledge around what we actually do. And that's part of why I try to be very active on Instagram and write blog posts and come to gyms and talk about what we do. It's like, hey, we're a business for people like you. This is what we can do. And that's one of the reasons that I try to get a lot of my clients to fill out like Google reviews, like talk a little bit about your experience, who you are, like what your apprehensions were and what the result were and what some of the struggles were. That way you're kind of decreasing that barrier and really just educating people. Because I think if people knew that, hey, there's somebody who works on people just like me every single day, and this isn't something that is permanent. Because a lot of people just settle. They're like, well, like how much back pain you are? Like, oh, well, the normal amount of back pain. It's like, well, the normal amount is 0. And it's like, oh, well, my mom had back pain and, my brothers have back pain. And it's like, it's just something that I'm going to have to live with. And I think that's true with a lot of people, that they just assume walking around in pain is normal. And it's absolutely not. Like, it's very common, right? But it's just not normal. And so if I can guide you and help you become a better manager of yourself, we can get that back pain to go away. And I mean, statistics show that you'll probably have more back pain the rest of your life, or at some point in your life. But well, now you've got tools to understand it and to diagnose, and you have tools to like figure out how to manage that and make that go away, and ideally not entering into the medical model. And so that's where like the education piece is so stinking huge.
And I think that people do put a large emphasis on genetics when they don't really have to. And I think it also is a crutch for a lot of people as well. It's like, oh, well, my dad had this and my grandpa had that and this person had this. So, it's okay if I live like this because I'm going to have it anyway. Yeah.
And I think like, because pain is such an abstract thing as well. Like, what is pain? It's just a signal in your body, and it's a perception of threat oftentimes. And oftentimes if it's there long enough, your brain makes chronic changes. And so it's easier to stay in pain. It's harder to break loose of that. And then you've got all these false beliefs surrounding it in terms of its permanence. And then also you've got all of these offenses that you'll make to your body that increase pain, like poor sleep, poor nutrition, poor mindset with that, previous history with that pain. All of these things can contribute to a heightened pain level. And then recognizing that, your body just might not be calibrating that super well. And I'll oftentimes tell people with chronic pain, it's like, okay, your pain is an alarm system. Picture an alarm system of your house. It's built to go off if somebody breaks in. Like, it's built to like save your life. Like if there's a fire in your house, it's going to go off. Oftentimes with chronic pain, that alarm system becomes miscalibrated. And so now instead of somebody breaking through your window and it going off, the squirrel hopping through the bushes is going to set that off. And so it kind of helps like frame that a little bit better for people. And then you want to break these, you want to hit like the reset button and break a lot of these false beliefs of just because your dad had low back pain, your mom had low back pain, you've had it forever, it doesn't mean you are destined to have back pain. Like, let's work together and let's get it to go away. Like, all pain is a message from your brain. Like, let's help your brain change the way that it sees what's going on. Let's change some of your thought processes. Let's clean up some of your movement patterns. Let's deal with some of these inefficiencies, be it mobility, be it strength. Like, there are so many things that you can do to affect pain, but you got to kind of break that mental false belief system. And that's oftentimes the hardest thing to do.
And going back in time, like, thousands of years before we're in like a civilization. This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout. Was the human body in as much pain as we are now? Or because we were utilizing it, was it just like in its natural habitat, if you will? Sure. And like, do you think that they had methods for like, okay, here's how we know how to, and maybe this is unknown, but like if you have low back pain, these are some ancient ways that people used to deal with those. Or if you had X pain, and like I said, this is going, way back before maybe there were any sort, not just modern, but any sort of doctor, any sort of like that kind of thing, where it's just strictly hunter-gatherer in that era.
Yeah, and I mean, with that, you look at the major differences between our modern culture and a hunter-gatherer culture. You're going to be moving a lot more. You're going to be lifting a lot more. If you are immobile, you're going to die, like a very early death. So it becomes more so of a Darwinian thing of survival of the fittest. Like if you are obese and slow, or if you break your leg, hopping over something, you're not going to be able to pass on your genetics to the next person. And so if you slow down, you die. And so I think that keeps you young. You're sprinting more. Like we don't sprint as a culture. You are fighting for your food. Whereas we live in a very, we can run through McDonald's and grab some food. We don't have to worry about that. And so I think in some capacities, yes, they might be in less pain just because they're more active. And then they also don't have the pollution aspect that we have. We don't have or they didn't have the crappy food that we have with all the preservatives and hormones and stuff. And so I think that would bring upon a more robust human, but in the same vein, they didn't have the medical healthcare system that we have. So you're going to have infant mortality rates going to be a lot higher. You're going to have average lifespan is going to be much less. And if you do, think about if your eyes don't work super well. Most of our eyes don't work very well. We're all wearing glasses or contacts, and so you've got really poor vision. How's that going to affect things? You're going to be bumping into things and tripping over things, and you're going to break ankles. And so I think modern medicine can help out with a lot of things as well. But so it's hard to do a apples to apples comparison with that. But I think certainly moving more and being more active and using your body and doing more things natural, getting outside and eating real food and all that stuff, that's what our body was designed to do.
Right. So basically it sounds like you were probably super fit and healthy until you weren't. Then you were just dead.
Until you can't outrun that line.
There wasn't a lot of I guess they were average that was the average, but there wasn't a lot of just mediocre kind of halfway feeling good, but not really, and that kind of thing. But
because if you're not pulling your own weight, you're out of the tribe. It is a tribal mentality, and these tribes aren't huge, and so if you're not going out and working, you're not pulling your own weight, you're going to be, left behind or kicked out of the tribe. And so staying fit, staying active, and taking I think with humanity, we like to take care of people that are sick, and there's outliers like that. But I think if it is a true hunter gatherer
survival,
you got to be pretty fit.
Do you think because we haven't been in a civilization for realistically that long, that we just haven't evolved for this type of life yet? And do you think that if we continue to live this exact kind of in this exact same scenario long enough, that we would stop feeling that pain because our bodies are now evolved to get used to it?
Yeah, pain is the warning system, because ultimately you're trying to stay alive. And if pain is a guard for that life, it is a very valuable tool to have. And so, I don't know, you see all these studies, there's people that are born without the ability to sense pain, and they all typically die earlier deaths, right? Because they're, don't realize I've got a broken femur and I've got internal bleeding now, or they'll have severe arthritis by the time they're in their 20s and late teens, and they can't move their arm because they've broken it so many times. And even modern day, they'll have to take they'll go get full body x-rays every couple of months just to see what breaks they have. And so I think pain is something that's very valuable as a tool, and just evolution or microevolution of the human body takes so stinking long. And with 9 months in development, and add at least another 20 years, if not 30 plus years, until you procreate again, the life cycle it's going to take thousands plus years for any micro changes to happen of any substance value. But also there's a lack of the survival of the fittest as well. It's everybody can procreate that is viable at this point, because it's not a fight for survival. And so for there to be a direction of microevolution as a whole for human civilization, I think that's pretty tough in the situation that we find ourselves in.
It's a weird kind of thing to where there's more of us now than ever, but to what degree are there, like, what's the best way to put it? Not quality people, but like, like to what degree, like at what percent, like if back what we were talking about before in hunter-gatherer, maybe that 95% of people were what you would consider healthy until, like I said, until they weren't healthy, and then they were probably dead. But I mean, we do know the statistics now on strictly on health, especially in America, it's not good. Globally, Western society is not good as well. But like, it's just weird that there's so many people, but so few of us don't have something wrong. How do you continue to grow as a species, and how do you continue to like evolve, not genetically and that kind of stuff, but evolve as a society if you're continuing to become worse as a person? We're not as smart as we should be with all the resources we have. We're not as healthy as we should be with all the knowledge and education and resources and things like that we have. Like, at what point do we hit that, like, because I think we're going downhill, but at what point do we hit the bottom of the hill when we have so much potential and so much, like, the infrastructure is there, but then we just don't have the capacity to even utilize it?
Right. And I think that's where a lot of like technology gains can be made, where you've got this like AI stuff that's improving or ought to be improving over the next several years. And so you're going to create all these systems that keep us alive. And my dad always says, like, our technology has surpassed our humanity in many capacities. Like, we're really good at keeping people alive, but we don't pause to wonder the quality of their life and focus on the quality of their life. And so I think we're actually on like a downward trend now in terms of like life expectancy for America. And it used to be a lot more than it was, but it's like those last several years aren't typically great. And so I think that's kind of on a downward trend now. But it's just like, we're getting unhealthier and healthier, and we're starting to have these chronic diseases earlier and earlier, like your 14-year-old type 2 diabetes person that you mentioned earlier. And so I don't know, like, are we going to figure out more medical advances, like with AI and with being able to connect worldwide and coordinate with all these different research labs and put all those together? Are we going to be able to figure something out? Like, what was that, like Matt Damon movie? You remember that? It's like Asylum, or I don't know how to pronounce it. It started with an E. But basically they had this like tanning bed type thing where you go in and it diagnoses everything that's wrong in your body, and it like fixes it. But then it created this like elitist society that like lived on the moon or something. It was kind of out there, but it was kind of a cool aspect. It was like, well, I can essentially be dead and this thing can bring me back. I can have type 2 diabetes and it fixes me right there, so I can go back out and eat whatever the heck I want to without consequence. And there's no reason to have pain because there's nothing wrong. And so like you start looking at things like stem cell injections, where they're able to like take these stem cells to what's like the pluripotent or totipotent stem cells, and so it's going to turn into whatever it is that you injected in, as long as there's something there. And so and you can grow people's kidneys, you can grow people's own hearts out of just taking a little bit of samples from that. And so like, what's the technology going to be able to allow us to do as we progress as a society? And that gets really scary sometimes. But I think we don't naturally like discipline as a species, and so we're always going to look for like the easy way out of how can I do what I want to do with no consequence. And I don't know, we'll see. It's kind of scary. I think like the whole ignorance is bliss. Like if we just ignore it, it'll go away. Yeah. And it's like, what was that movie that came out? Like Don't Look Up. Did you ever watch that? Where it's like this like big asteroids.
Oh yeah, with the dude from The Office was in it, right? The main guy.
Steve Carell.
Yeah. He was like the main.
Yeah. There was a lot of big names, like Jonah Hill was in there. And
I don't think I finished that though. I started to watch it, but yeah.
It was hilarious. Like it was so funny because people were just like ignoring the obvious of like, and it ends where it's like, well, it just hits Earth and it wipes out the entire civilization of people. It's like, well, okay, you could have avoided that.
Right.
And I think that's just there's so many interesting parallels to modern society. And I think it could potentially be a pretty offensive movie for some people just with the parallels that they're making. But I was like, yeah, it was like, if we just ignore it, nothing bad's going to happen until we've screwed ourselves. And it's like, well, now I've got this, and woe is me.
With the future, though, I mean, short term wise, what do you see as the, just in general, like the needs for physical therapy? Do you just continue to see it becoming more and more of a necessity?
Yeah,
I guess that's
people are becoming
good for
more
business
and more
potentially.
Ignorant. Yeah. I mean, people are becoming more and more ignorant about their bodies. They're not like, there's, like I said, there's so much knowledge out there, but there's limited amounts of wisdom. And so like the same thing with like diet, like we know how to eat right, but we choose not to. Like I know that, I should have X amount of protein and X amount of carbs and stuff, and that that new sandwich at Chick-fil-A that just came out probably isn't a good idea, but I'm totally
sounds good though.
Some of that. That's awesome. And so I think we need guides, and we need people to show us how to do things. And it's the same reason like I go to a gym that has coaches. It's a small group training. CrossFit is kind of what I ascribe to right now, and I've got the accountability. I've got people telling me how to do things. I've got people telling me when I'm doing things wrong, when I need to shed weight. I got strategies, and so that's what I'm paying for, is for them to come in, and I push myself way harder than I would have pushed myself if I'm just working out by myself. The programming is way better. And so when you're enlisting somebody that knows more than you in a certain area and positions themselves as a guide and a specialist in that area, I think that is very, very beneficial. And with your typical physical therapy, as we're moving less and hurting more and focusing more on surgeries and medication, like of course our body's going to break down more without that emphasis on quality movement. With your athletes, I think if we do a good job at physical therapy and you're seeing more of these out-of-network clinics pop up that specialize in treating them, the education level is going to increase. And so I think you're going to see a higher volume of people hiring physical therapists for their issues because, there's actually somebody out there that can work with me. And where it's just hasn't been that for the longest time. And so I think that's going to be a good thing because most people walk around in pain. It's like the statistics are astounding of how many people walk around in just day-to-day pain, and they just believe that they're stuck. And so, a lot of it comes down to education and just the progression of society. And I don't think I'm ever going to be out of a job. I tell people that my goal is to get them to the point where they do not need me. They're like, that's not a good business model. I was like, you know how many people are in Louisville? Like, I would rather get you to the point where you're an excellent manager of yourself, and we can move to that whole reclaim portion and work on a goal pushing you forward if that's something that you feel would benefit you. But my goal is to where like you do not need me for wherever you came in, and I've equipped you to the point that you're good. Now go tell somebody else about me. Like, you see somebody in the gym that's not moving right, send them my way. Yeah. Like, I will never be out of a job, which is a cool place to be.
Job security.
Job security.
Is there a certain like season of the year? Is it like more busy for you?
I've only been in business for myself for 3 years, and I've certainly grown over the last 3 years. And so, but trends, what I've noticed with people that are doing the same thing are that summers are generally a little bit slower, as are the latter part of quarter four. So you get into your November, December, you've got holidays coming up, and with the out-of-network, people are paying out-of-pocket up front, and they're going to be getting their checks, reimbursement checks later on. And so oftentimes an upfront cost during holiday season or during vacation season is a little bit less appealing. Gotcha. Whereas your general physical therapy, it's people typically hit their deductibles by the end of the year, and so oftentimes things are free or very greatly discounted, or they hit their deductible, so they go and have a surgery in quarter three, so then they're going through physical therapy in quarter four. And so it's a completely different ball game. But I've noticed over the last 3 years, it's just every quarter just gets busier. So we'll see.
In regards to like CrossFit, there's a lot of people who I talk to who are like really into CrossFit, and there's like obviously a lot of people who are just kind of like not about it.
Sure.
Is it just that CrossFit has the ability to be so extreme that it kind of turns people off to it, and they have this idea that they're going to get hurt, or maybe they've gotten hurt because they've tried to do it, but they weren't doing it in a organized way? Or like, what do you think that the kind of like black and white on CrossFit is about?
Yeah. So CrossFit has a horrible history where, I mean, I think their mascot was Rhabdo the Clown, making fun of rhabdomyolysis, and like, that's just not okay. And it started off with good intentions of, hey, let's create lots of variety to create, to make people more prepared for general life. And so let's incorporate some strength, let's incorporate some cardio, maybe some gymnastics and flexibility and some power. And because you never know what life is going to throw at you. So let's bring all of these focuses from other weightlifting disciplines, and let's put it all together and kind of raise your base level higher and higher and higher. And so with a CrossFitter, you're not going to be the strongest person in the world. You've got strongman athletes for that. You're not going to be the best power lifter. You're not going to have the most muscle hypertrophy. You're not going to beat seasoned runners in running. But I am going to, across the board, average better than every single person out there. And I think that's the appealing aspect. And what CrossFit turned into shortly after it started, it became more of a sport. So instead of it being created for a general person, which is what it was created for, it turned into the sport that you're kind of seeing today. So people would get really aggressive, and they weren't really organized in terms of programming. And they didn't really have a lot of intelligence when it came to programming. So you get a lot of people that were overtraining, and it attracted a lot of hyper-aggressive people that peaked in high school and just like, all right, let's go after this. And then they would get hurt. And so CrossFit really didn't do a lot of fantastic things, but they've certainly refined over the years. And so now the programming is exceptional with that. I get stronger every single cycle with things, and there's different focuses on different cycles. And for me, why I started doing, I've been working with CrossFit athletes for the last like 7 years. And I started doing it close to 2 years ago. And I was working out at the factory gym here in Louisville. That's actually where my first office was. I was able to rent a room out of that and utilize the rest of the gym with my clients. And so I got a free membership there. And so I was just there every single morning at 6 a.m. lifting. And while I was getting really good hypertrophy gains there, it just dawned on me one morning. I'm like doing squats and sipping coffee. Like, I don't know the last time I did anything remotely athletic. I don't know the last time that I ran. I don't know if I could run a mile right now. I don't know if I could sprint and not pull a hamstring. I had jumped out of my truck a few days prior to that, and I just remember just landing especially hard. It's like, man, gravity was turned up today for some reason. And it just scared me. It's like, I think I'm on a track to becoming a statistic where if I'm required to do anything remotely athletic or protect my family in a situation or whatever it is, like I'm gonna blow something. Like, that's not okay. And so it's like, all right, it's time to start doing CrossFit because I'm running every single week. I'm deadlifting heavy every single week. I'm doing pull-ups. I'm doing certain aspects of gymnastics. I'm powerlifting, and it's just like you're doing everything. You're having this programmed, and you have people there that are watching you and making sure that your form is good, making sure that if your weight is too heavy, like I've had coaches several times tell me to shed weight. Like, hey, you're screwing up the form on this. And so I think when placed in that, and I've got a really good hold on myself in terms of like the competitiveness, like I know how to rein it in because I've seen people who don't rein it in and they really screw themselves up. And so I think if you're able to rein it in and stay smart, stay with good form, that overall it is like the best form of exercise for the generalist. And I've got I really don't care to do a 700-pound deadlift. I don't really care to hit 500-plus pounds on a squat. And so I don't care about that. I don't care about being up on stage as a bodybuilder. Like, that is not in the cards for me. I don't care about going out and running an Ironman or any of that. It's like, I want to, one, have, at least decent aesthetics. I want to look okay. I want to have decent amounts of muscle hypertrophy. But most importantly, if I want to go out and run a couple miles, I want to be able to go do that and, knock out, sub 8-minute miles. If I want to go help somebody move, I'm not throwing out my back like I'm helping things. If my wife, for some reason, hurts herself or needs me to become a caretaker, I'm going to be able to do everything that I can and not worry about it. Same thing with like parents. And so it's just like my base level of everything is rising really high, and I'm going to be better at all things on average compared to any other discipline of lifting. And so for me, that's what the most attractive part of it is. And I think as long as you frame it that way, that's what you're going to get out of it. But you're certainly not going to be the best at any singular event as compared to your power lifter or your bodybuilder or whatever it is.
Right.
I like it though. As long as you're moving and you find something that you enjoy, that you can be consistent at, and it doesn't have to be the exact same thing for life. Like, I may jump into a bodybuilding mode in a few years and just put on as much muscle as I can, or I might jump into, like, who knows? Like, just find something that you like. And I used to be very much like, this is what you've got to do, and just very judgmental. This, like, if you want to go play pickleball, go play pickleball. Like, if you want to play golf, if you just want to walk every single day, like, that's what I'm focused on, is just do something that gets you up and gets you moving, that gets you excited about life, that keeps you physically fit and generally prepared for whatever life has to throw at you.
I think that's a great place to end the episode. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me out.
Before we head out, if you want to share your website, business, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so Linchpin Performance. Linchpin Performance is the business. Same thing on Instagram. Just search Linchpin Performance, linchpinperformance.com. So it's pretty easy to find online, but I do a lot on Instagram. I don't really do too much on Facebook, and looking to probably start a podcast in the next couple months as well with that, just to bring more knowledge towards like healthcare in Louisville and what's out there and what specializations are out there. But super easy to find online.
That's very exciting. I look forward to that podcast.
I'll have to have you on.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be really fun. I would definitely appreciate that. But no, it's great getting to chat with you tonight. Had a blast.
Yeah, thanks again.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.